Hi guys, David here with another science update. So today the first article that I want to look at is called Our Climate Projections for 2500 Show an Earth that is Alien to Humans. This is pretty interesting, and I think the best part of it is actually the pictures, so we'll get to that before too long. So it says, there are many reports based on scientific research that talk about the long-term impacts of climate change, such as rising levels of greenhouse gases, temperatures, and sea levels by the year 2100. The Paris Agreement, for example, requires us to limit warming to under 2.0 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels by the end of the century. And so the premise of this article is that we don't usually think past 2100, but this is surprising, the article notes, because people born now will only be in their 70s by 2100. So what will the world look like for their children and grandchildren? And that's something that arguably shouldn't be ignored. And so the first paper here, or the first figure, shows the global mean near surface air temperature. And basically what this is temperature projections. We'll focus on these little globes here, or these little picture maps. It shows temperature projections under different scenarios. And so the one at the bottom is, we can see 2100, 2200, and then the year 2500. And the three different rows show three different projections. So according to some projections, the Earth won't really warm up that much, and arguably that would be because we managed to rein in greenhouse gas emissions. But under more pessimistic scenarios, this looks more intense, and so we'll say the most pessimistic scenario is at the top, and it shows that by the year 2500, large parts of the Earth will have warmed up by 8 degrees, and most of it will have warmed up by at least 4 to 6 degrees. So that's kind of the scenario they're talking about. It's hard to know what's going to happen, obviously, because for one thing, models that project out what will happen for hundreds of years in advance are basically not reliable. There's no way to ensure that they could be reliable. But on the other hand, it could be useful to just get a sense of what might happen. So this in no way indicates what will happen, but it could indicate what might happen under certain scenarios. And I think the best part of this work is funny. It's scientific in a way, but it blends art to try to get an image across. And so what we have here is a picture, three pictures. The top image shows a traditional pre-contact indigenous village. So this would be somewhere in North America. And then the middle picture shows what it might look like now, sort of a mix of forests and suburban infrastructure. And then the last picture down below shows kind of like a deforested, overpopulated place with vegetation decline, with sparse or degraded infrastructure and minimal human activity. Oh, I see. So this is not overpopulation. This is maybe underpopulation. So that's kind of neat. I don't know why I'm laughing. I mean, it's funny because there's no way that we can know that if this will actually occur. And it's funny to me that in this sort of quasi-scientific treatment, they took the time to make these. I think these are oil paintings. It's really cool. They're really, really nice paintings and very imaginative. I don't know if this will happen, but it could happen. I think that's the point. So they do another one. This is the Midwestern United States. And you can see in the top picture, this is pre-colonization indigenous agriculture. So they're growing maize. And I think maybe you can see some indigenous dwelling places in the back. And now you have in the middle, you have the current, you have big agriculture, and they're, farming large scale. And then the bottom is the best part. This is the year 2500. And it's, obviously the climate will change. It will go from temperate climate in the Midwest to humid subtropical climate. And we have this subtropical agroforestry based on oil palms and arid zone succulents, and the crops are tended to by AI drones with reduced human presence. And so you can see the drone there. It's like tending to the tree. And then the last picture this is of the Indian subcontinent, and the top image is a busy agrarian village scene of rice planting, livestock use, and social life. You can see they're hanging out with the elephants. And then the middle one is what they say is what we have now. I don't know if this is true. I've never been to rural India, but maybe if some of you have, you can comment if this is the scene that you typically see. You see like this highway overpass, or maybe that's a train, and then down below you see kind of like traditional farming with some vehicles helping out. In the back you have cars and trucks and things like that, but you also have a lot of really hands-on labor farming. And then we see here the year 2500, and we have more exotic infrastructure. We still have that same overpass, which seems unlikely unless somebody really did a good job of building that. It's there like 450 years later. We have some interesting, we've got greenhouses. We have over to the right, there's vertical farming, it looks like. And then the thing that kind of freaks me out is that the person who's doing some farming is here in a spacesuit. So I hope that doesn't become necessary, but that's a great picture. Really interesting. So the point of the paper is not to say that this is going to happen, but it's to say, okay, we really need to think through this, because if we don't succeed in stemming our greenhouse gas emissions, then we really will probably be faced with a very different mode of life than that which we have become accustomed to. And to capture it in these pictures is very evocative, and I loved it. So the next paper that I want to talk about is called Dynamic Twists and Loops Can Enable DNA to Modulate Its Function. It says, when people think of DNA, they visualize a string-like double helix structure, as shown in this picture. In reality, the DNA double helix in cells is supercoiled and constrained into loops. So we've all gotten used to seeing this, this double helix pattern as shown in this picture. But what they're saying is the reality of it is that there's actually a lot more to it. The structure starts with a double helix, but then it loops and supercoils into all kinds of different patterns. What's more, this supercoiling and looping are known to influence every aspect of DNA activity, but how this happens has not been clear. So DNA obviously is the basis for life in the cell, and the way it controls what happens in the cell is by being expressed. And what that means is that proteins will come and read certain sequences of the DNA code and then generate RNA molecules, which then leave the cell nucleus and are responsible for directing the synthesis of proteins. And then the proteins are the things that get things done in your cell, the enzymes. So the DNA controls everything, but this looping and supercoiling actually influences what parts of the DNA are being expressed. If all of the DNA information was expressed at once, there would be no such thing as life, because the DNA has a superabundance of information in it, and only certain amounts of it should be expressed at any given time for a certain type of cell. So in recent research published in the Journal of Nature Communications, researchers at Baylor College of Medicine showed that supercoiling and looping can transmit mechanical stress along the DNA backbone. This stress can promote the separation of strands of the double helix at specific distant sites, exposing the DNA bases, which may facilitate repair, replication, transcription, or other aspects of DNA function. So in this research, the researchers began by making small pieces of supercoiled DNA like those present in living cells. They took a short linear DNA double helix and twisted it once, twice, 3 times, or more, either in the direction of the turn of the double helix, that's called positive supercoiling, or against it, which would be called negative supercoiling, and then they connected the ends together, forming a loop. So this gave them essentially a model supercoiled DNA that they could study in depth without all the complexity of the cell. So looking at figure 6 from the Nature Communications paper that this is based on, this gives us an idea of what we're looking at. Basically, if you look here, we have this circular DNA strand, and we have 3 sites of interest, site 1, site 2, and site 3, in red, blue, and green. And what they're showing is that when they supercoil this DNA, they find that kinking in site 1 is correlated with kinking in site 2 because they're at these extreme ends of this type of loop. Right, this is called, these extreme ends are called superhelical apexes. And what they found is if they kinked site 1, site 2 was also kinked. Whereas there was no correlation, for instance, with site 3. And so you can see how, though these sites are actually distant from one another in a linear sense, if you were to kind of go along the loop here, just driving along the loop in your car or something, they're very distant from one another. There's this strange, unexpected correlation between the expression of site 1 and site 2. So that's basically the idea. The idea is that the supercoiling and kinking itself becomes a potent controller of gene expression and the correlation between linearly distant genomic regions. So I thought this paper was super interesting, and I think it may end up having a big impact on collective understanding of gene expression. So thanks so much for watching. Please go ahead and like the video and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll join me again in the future soon. Bye.